Hello, and welcome to Front Porch Radio. My name is Julie Wilder, and I am flying solo today. Normally, I have a guest in here, and we're interviewing and we're doing fun things. But life has been so busy, hasn't it? It feels like everything's been going all the time without stop. And so today I find myself in the studio by myself. And if you've been catching this program, we have conversations for the common good. And I was like, you know what? I can talk for a little bit about what's going on. It's been a while since I've done that. And yeah, so I'm just going to kind of just take a little bit of time here to just kind of frame what's happening in the collective, and just kind of touch into some of the conversations I've been having with people, because maybe you too have been thinking some of these things and it'll make you feel a little bit sane. So, yeah. So a little bit of an update. What is today? It is March 3rd of 2025. We are just kind of in this new era with a new situation going on. We've got President Trump doing President Trump things, and then we also have this kind of unprecedented situation with a billionaire, like literally spending the night in the White House and lording over cabinet meetings and having press conferences in the White House, talking about Elon Musk, everyone. And I know that a lot of people after the election were just like, I'm going to tune out. I have to protect my mental health. I cannot even, right, with what is going on. And in a lot of ways, I totally respect that and have myself only been kind of dipping in my pinky into some of this stuff because, yeah, there's mental health going on. There's also just regular things that we have to be paying attention to in our lives. But if you have completely checked out, I think it's time that you check in just a little bit. So I'm going to give you some of the highlights that I've been checking in on because, I run a business. And I'm a mom, so I'm raising a teenager. I am trying to keep up with all my doctor's appointments, and just, regular life that is happening. And there seems to be a lot going on in regular life too. I've had my roof just got redone for an insurance claim, and there's just been a lot going on, is what I'll say. But one of the things that I have been checking in on is, just kind of like a pulse of what's going on. And I remember talking to a therapist friend of mine, and I said, it's kind of weird because I was really anxious in the lead up to the election, just trying to, get people to get out the vote and realize how important it is and all those different kinds of things. And I said, but it's kind of interesting because post-election, it's almost been a little bit freeing because the thing has happened. We are here. And so I don't have to be as stressed out about that. Now it's a completely different mode of being. And so one of the places that I've taken refuge, because we're seeing a lot happening in mass media, which makes me so grateful for this independent radio station here. Independent is so important. We're always good to continue to support independent radio. WPRK is an absolute gem in the nation. It is a truly student-run radio station, and it has got regular student DJs as well as community volunteer DJs. I don't think anybody here, besides maybe the staff gets paid, but all the DJs are all volunteer. So that's good to keep in the back of your mind. And one of the places that I have found some refuge is on Substack, because while it can be difficult to find balanced news online, it's getting even more difficult as a lot of journalists are raising the flag that this is the end of, journalism in America on the major stations, in a lot of ways. And so one of the really cool things is being able to go onto a site like Substack where you can hear directly from not just some of the people I follow on Substack are Van Jones, who I've always loved his commentary on CNN. Um, but you can also find absolute experts in their field. These are the people that would typically be interviewed on one of the news stations, but you get their unfiltered commentary on Substack. One of my favorite people to follow is Heather Cox Richardson. She talks and summarizes what's going on a daily basis. She's a history professor. She kind of rose to fame during the pandemic era. And now she is a voice that is just kind of recording and putting into context what's going on in a very like a calm way. It's not hyped up or anything like that. And so when you get onto the news stations, it can just be like headline after headline with clickbait, and then you don't even have anything substantive sometimes. And sometimes you do, but you got to really seek it out. So that's one of the reasons I really love Substack, and I encourage everyone to tap into news sources like that. There's also a really interesting website called Ground News, and that is it's basically their tagline is see every side of every news story, and you can read the news from multiple perspectives, which helps you see through the media bias with reliable news from local and international sources. So you can go on there, and what it'll do is it'll kind of show you what left-leaning media is saying, what right-leaning media is saying, and then what center media is saying. And it's a really cool way to be able to check your confirmation bias. It's a really interesting way to see, what are the people on the right all seeing that I'm not seeing? So you can see what agendas essentially are being pushed at the same time. And you can even buy subscriptions for people that you're concerned that they don't have the discernment when they're looking at the news to be able to kind of tell what's real and what's fake, which is getting harder and harder with a lot of deep fakes going on because of AI. So we're kind of in this very interesting moment where we have the rise of AI going on. You have this kind of clash between the billionaire force and everybody else. And so, you've got also, like, interestingly, like, technology being utilized, especially AI technology being utilized in government bodies. I don't know if the Doge is actually a government. I don't know if you would call it a government body, but they're in there under the premise of looking for waste. And there are a lot of people, a lot of experts in cybersecurity, and just history and the rise of fascism and different things like that. People who study the fall, coups and democracy, are all kind of calling out what we're seeing in some of these different areas as something to be aware of. And so then you also have a lot of noise that's going on that is just almost like pure distraction. And then some of it is you know, some of it is not that big of a deal. Like they were talking about taking the penny away. The problem isn't that the penny is being, discontinued necessarily, but the problem is that does the president have the authority to do that, or is that a congressional authority issue? And so there's just a lot going on in terms of, potential constitutional crises going on, as well as cybersecurity, and the approach of taking a sledgehammer to these systems that, in a lot of ways, it's very easy to look at mega systems like this and say, oh, there's some waste or there's some fraud or something like that, which is why we have actual auditors, not AI, programs going in there. But different things like this, one of the things to bear in mind is that these are the kinds of things that should be done with a lot of oversight, and also done in a time frame so that we can reduce like negative impacts to American people, the economy, different things like that. So a lot of what we talk about when we talk about fixing systems is, rolled out plans that would reduce. It's like a harm reduction approach to making change, as opposed to like doing a sledgehammer and then seeing what happens. Um, and so we're kind of in that point where sledgehammers are being strewn about to different systems, and it's being tested, through the court system. And then some of the things are being tested in a way that has left a lot of people very, very concerned. So there's a couple of Substacks I'd like to point out. There's one called Lexi's Substack, and this is somebody who has worked really high up at Microsoft and Apple, I believe, and they look at a lot of IT. They're looking at through the lens and framework of how you would create a report internally for a cyber attack, essentially, on your system. And so they're reporting what's going on with the AI and Doge, which for those of you that are not being kept up, um, there is a department that has been created that is going into the U.S. Treasury and accessing Americans' information, including Social Security numbers, bank accounts, and different things like that. And there is a lot of concern about that being done. I'm saying that calmly, but it's a lot of people are basically freaking out that is even allowed to happen. And it's kind of unknown at this time what information has been compromised and who has that information and different things like that. And so there's just some warning signs that people who study these things throughout history, modern and not so modern history, are saying that, there's some attempts right now also to kind of negate the FDIC, which is the federal depository. Like basically when you put money in a bank, it guarantees the government is guaranteed that that money will be there if something happens, like the bank failing or something like that. So it's kind of like an insurance policy. And what we're seeing is this administration is starting to begin to rattle the cages on that and basically painting it as another department that has waste and things like that. So you have a lot of our security systems, our Social Security, our Medicaid. A lot of politicians on the Democratic side are incredibly concerned that payments to Medicaid and Social Security are going to be disrupted possibly within the next 30 to 90 days. And something like that is going to disrupt healthcare. It's going to disrupt a lot of retirees who rely on that income to pay their bills. And even if it's something that got disrupted in a short term, the amount of stress on that, especially when you're talking about the elder population who, have high blood pressure and susceptible to heart attacks, the stress of that alone is not okay. And not to mention the actual, if there was to be a disruption, that would cause, a lot of just people basically freaking out in the streets, right? And so one of the kind of it's funny because I was thinking about this in more of a symbolic or metaphysical, not metaphysical, metaphoric way. I was thinking about when the Grinch stole Christmas, that classic beloved Dr. Seuss tale, and how he stole Christmas and he looks back down at the town and he sees the Whoville and they're all smiling and singing and just really being in the spirit of Christmas. It wasn't about the gifts after all. It was just about the spirit of being together, and they weren't about to let something like that, the materialism of it all get in between the spirit of community and coming together and thanks. On the other side of things. And I just kind of want to put that out there as a way, as just something for us to have in our heads. Not that it would be okay if, the Grinch stole Christmas, right? It doesn't make it okay. But to keep that spirit of togetherness, of realizing that material things are certainly just material things. And what is important is that we have each other, that we have each other's backs, and that we take care of each other in trying times. And as somebody who has had my own personal experience in poverty, I'm a single parent, and so I had a unfortunately just a ridiculous, honestly, experience leaving a business in which that left me essentially destitute because there was a lawsuit involved. And I was homeless for a while, and really below the poverty line in many ways. And one of the there's always good and bad in every scenario, and of course, there was a lot of bad that came out of that. It's like a slow-moving, unstoppable accident, that is happening in real slow time with no end in near is what poverty feels like. And there's a lot of stress there, but one of the things about not having any money is you actually have to rely on other people to help you with things. If you don't have a car, then you need to catch rides with people. And if you don't have enough food on the table, then that means that maybe some friends are inviting you over to eat dinner at their house. And so there's something to be said for um, money in a lot of ways creates a little bit of an insulation, and or it can, it doesn't have to, of course. But yeah, you're in your own little car, you're doing your own thing all of the time, having dinner in your own house. And a lot of times when you get to a level of not having enough, financial means to be able to get things done, it gets done in other ways. And that's basically through our social network of everybody helping each other out. And I will say, that having that experience really informed me that even though it's scary, even though it is unjust, when things like that happen, and even though it feels inescapable, there is still um, like a silver lining, if you will, to being able to connect with your neighbors, to be able to connect with your family if you have good, healthy family to be around, the people in your workplace. There's just a more empathetic, compassionate, and just kind of a fun time too. Some of the best fun I've ever had in my life was also when I was in poverty, because there's nothing else to do but just make up, fun games at the house, and just enjoy yourself, in a way that sometimes when you're busy, busy, busy chasing after that paycheck, you don't get the opportunity to do. So I just wanted to bring that kind of metaphor up right now. But there are some things that we can be doing to prepare for potential disruption. Doesn't mean that it will happen. But this is certainly the first time in my life that I've thought the chances of something going sideways are high enough that I've actually taken some chances. Particularly living down here in Florida, looking at some of the disaster relief that is being impacted right now by some of the cuts that are being made. That means that come hurricane season, the responses may not be as rapid as they have been in the past. And you might have to fend for yourself a little bit longer. So thinking about if you prepared for like a 3-day outage before, you might be wanting to prepare for a 3-week outage at this point in time. So some of the things I've done in my household, I've gotten, a couple of buckets of lunch and dinner, like dried packet meals, that would last 60 days, for 2 people, I think. Each of those buckets, I did a breakfast and a lunch one, just to have in my back pocket. Always good to have anyway. Um, but just in case that there was some sort of disruption. I've also been taking kind of stock of my house. I'm in a pretty good position. My 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 water heater and my stove are run on propane. So it's not really reliant on a city service. And so if the electricity was out, I could still have hot water. I could still cook on my stove. I also have a gas dryer. So, I'd have to figure out how to spark the electric though. So maybe I won't have a dryer, but you know what? Clothespins always come in handy. And So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking at. I also have solar panels on my house so that I could at least keep my fridge plugged in. I know during the last hurricane, I went the extra step and made sure I got like a radio, ham radio. I have lots of batteries. I have one of those plugins that go into the car, so that you can turn your car electric socket, where they have the car lighter, and you turn that into a plug-in. So there's things like that that I've just kind of been slowly preparing on as I've hashtag been adulting, right? Getting my first aid kit put together, making sure that I have extra prescriptions on hand, extra dog food on hand. So that way, if there is some sort of possibility of a disruption, you're better prepared. I know I've also taken the step of getting some things that I know are highly like nutrient dense powders like spirulina and moringa, a couple of other things like that, in the case of some sort of food outage, because we're kind of on the precipice of, um, a couple of converging things that are happening right now. One of them is just kind of on that environmental disaster front. We've just come through a pretty rough hurricane season, and the Carolinas, especially, are still trying to recover from that. And unfortunately for them, all of those dead trees are turning into kindling for fire. And we just saw some fires over the weekend starting up. And that's, certainly not going to be the first of the fires that happened in the Carolinas. Anytime trees comes down, that means you have dead wood, and dead wood means kindling. So that's certainly something that's on the horizon there. And at the same time that we have increasing weather concerns, I mean, we have the crazy wildfire fires out west, but we're also seeing some of I mean, Brian Norcross, a famous meteorologist here in Florida, is posting, like, hey, they're stopping doing weather balloons. This administration is trying to take down some of the critical scientific data collection and the ways that we post that in the past. So we don't even have reliable data right now, going or will be going forward in a lot of ways. So a lot of that is going to have to become some sort of like locally sourced. I can see people getting, you're going to want to be getting your own, what do you call the water catchment, so you can see how many inches are falling and different things like that. It's not going to help us in the case of a big old hurricane. But the data collection is really, really important. And if we don't have that, we're going to have some uncertainty and confusion when hurricane season comes. And so just at least taking some of those things seriously and preparing now mentally for what you might need. Like I got an atlas, because we're also looking at some potential outages in terms of um, like the internet could be out for a long time, right? And so if you have a crisis in your community, I mean, that we just saw that happen in the Carolinas, they were out of the internet for a long, long time. And so being able to take a look and consider different things like that. I know for Christmas, I made sure to get an almanac, partially as a way to teach my teenager how to read a map, just because it's a good skill to have, but also just to have it in my back pocket in case infrastructure like the internet was not available in a time when you needed to navigate. Um, so there's some things that you can be doing in that regard, to be protecting yourself. Another thing that has been suggested, there's a few things that were suggested. Uh, Gosh, let me see if I can find I'm logged into my Substack here. Oh, I don't have it right in front of me, but there's a couple of things I'll just kind of tell you some of the things that I've been doing. One is there are websites out there that will kind of help delete your footprint from the internet, like the where your random. If you ever try to find someone on the internet and you're like, oh, people's addresses and phone numbers are out here, that's a fun thing to try to tackle right now, through Delete Me, freezing your credit, which can be done through all three. You can log in, create an account with all of the three credit bureaus, and freeze your credit. So that way, like if somebody has been able to get your social security number and, passwords, that's another thing making sure that I know it's a pain in the butt, but making sure you have multi-factor authentication on, especially for bank accounts and different things like that. That is really, really important. Also making sure that you have, if you've ever gotten like a direct deposit from the government for your tax return, or if you get direct payments for Social Security or something like that, some of the recommendations right now from experts is to open another bank account so that you can have most of your money in that bank account, and then any of the money that any of the accounts that the government may have access to only has the limited funds in it. Um, because apparently, if they can deposit it, they can also extract it, which is important to know as we're watching some of these interesting things going on at the Treasury Department and with the FDIC. And so, yeah, I'm. These are things that, again, you know, it's these are just kind of smart things people should be doing anyway. Um, and I'm not trying to create any kind of panic or anything like that. It's just, how can we practically manage and prepare and mentally be ready, and then hope nothing happens. Hope that smart people are in the room and protecting the data on that level of the Treasury in the best possible ways. And so, yeah, so getting, as far as passwords go, I use 1Password, which is a pretty secure network resource. There's a couple of other ones out there, but that's the one I've been using. And I've done that for a number of reasons. Like sometimes you had to share passwords with someone. Like I had a company and I had to share passwords with my business partner for a long time, and that was a very secure way to do that. But it's a great way to do that within your family as well, which is not what some, like, I know I use Google Password. I used to use Google Passwords in the past, but it didn't allow like mutual password sharing between, like, say, husbands and wives, or husbands and husbands, or wives and wives, or mothers and children. Those are the kinds of things that are just great to know anyway. But certainly, planning a day with some friends to sit down and just kind of work on securing your household, which is a great idea in this age of, I mean, hackers are getting smarter and better every single day. So making sure that you have those kinds of things um, just kind of locked down and ready before we get too much further, because on the one hand, we just talked about like some of the environmental crises that are coming. We're also having the rise of artificial intelligence, which is going to speed up any kind of hacking efforts or anything like that. I mean, AI is an incredible tool, and it is, I've used ChatGPT for a number of things to help me, just think through processes or brainstorm, or write the occasional letter. And so I'm not like poo poo on AI, but it is a very powerful tool that can be used for good or not so good, just like any other tool. And so the thing is with AI is that it's developing so rapidly that the acceleration of its capabilities is going to go faster than most of us can even realize. So especially with the rise of AI, and then you have these environmental things going on, and then the other part of things is, of course, what is happening in terms of public health data. We have a bird flu, what is it, H5N1, that epidemiologists are looking at, and they're kind of having to go rogue right now because that is one of the areas in which there have been a lot of cuts, is our our data, our health data. And so again, I'm like on Substack finding epidemiologists that have been reporting and going directly to those folks as opposed to looking at a federal agency, because that data is not available in many ways. So we have a bird flu that is affecting two things. One, it's affecting, people just think of it as like the price of eggs going up. And it's not just that. It's the eggs, it's the chickens themselves. And then so that's affecting, let's say, a large part of our food population. And so, in America we eat a lot of chicken and we eat a lot of eggs, right? And so there's but that bird flu has also started to affect other types of mammals, not just wildlife, but also is starting to get into the cow population. And so then you're going to start seeing some impacts possibly and potentially on milk and on beef. And so we have this, kind of threat to our food system that is very, very close. It has already um, morphed into there have been humans that have gotten it, and it is not a good one, okay? I think the death rate is like 50% or something like that. Now it's not as right now they don't think it's transmissible. It's mostly transmissible by droppings. So, like the wild bird population, especially during migration season, which is happening right now, that can bring droppings into your community, and people are like, oh well, I'm just going to start raising chickens in my backyard, in order to, help solve this egg problem. But that becomes problematic because if that chicken population ends up catching the bird flu, now those chickens are in the backyard much closer to humans, and can be problematic. Sharon Asked, she's an author, and she's been an advocate for people growing chickens in their backyard forever and ever. And she was like, I would not start growing chickens in my backyard right now because you are not trained to handle these kinds of things. And what's that doing is that's putting chickens squarely in neighborhoods as opposed to at least, cordoned off at actual farms. Um, so, so, so there's the potential for another pandemic. The epidemiologists are saying it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when at this point. But that's not making a lot of the news cycles, which is why we need to really be staying alert and trying to find the information ourselves in ways that has been easier to find in the past. It's not as easy these days. So again, Substack is where I'm getting a lot of my information directly from experts in the fields. These are the types of people that our news journalists would interview typically, and so you can just like go right to the source, and listen to their concerns. Um, and and so we've got the food system crisis on that side of things, and um, also on the food system front is tied to what's going on with the threats to immigrants right now. And I did an entire series on Front Porch Radio, the first iteration of Front Porch Radio 7 years back. And so I am a little bit more clued in than most people are to how the food system functions. Um, because I've actually interviewed and talked with farm workers who are just incredibly resilient, and had an incredibly resilient activism that got them all the way to the White House, earning medals for their activism. Because, within the last 20 years, there are documented cases of slavery in the fields of Florida. And those were the kinds of things that they were addressing. And so what's happening right now with all of the threats of deportation and different things like that. I mean, our food system, by and large, is our food is picked by um, migrant farm workers who come through seasonally to earn wages for their family and send it back home. And that is one of the reasons why our food is actually falsely inexpensive, in a lot of ways, because we are relying on um, an unprotected class of workers to pick our food, and they will accept, of course, a lower wage for that kind of work, which is deeply problematic. And so we've got this bird flu in that is currently affecting the chicken population, but is about to start impacting the cow population as well. And then you also have um, there potentially could be food left in the fields that was planted, and there may not be enough migrants to do that. So you may see calls from farmers in the next year to come work in the fields of the farms to help pick the food. And that is something that if you are hearing that call, I would say go ahead out into the fields and pick some food if you have the capability to do that. And so you have all of that going on the food front, and then on the health front, you also have just this, where we still have COVID going around. A lot of people have built up some sort of immunity, but we also have, we're finding that a lot of people have compromised immunity from having had COVID because it is an immune compromising virus they've been figuring out. Um, so one of the epidemiologists I talked to, I was reading, said that the flu has the N1 component, which is I think it's I want to say it's H5N1, is the bird flu, and one of the components is in the flu vaccine, and it might provide some sort of protection. And so even though it is a very scary virus, it would, if it does become a pandemic, it would dwarf the COVID. It would dwarf a lot of the pandemics we've had in the past in terms of its impact. But you have, a health, putting things into context, you have a healthcare system that is barely recovered from COVID and all of the workers there that went through that entire scene. And we're also going to be seeing potentially, some disruptions. Just this morning on the news, there might be disruptions to Social Security and Medicaid, which could cause, a lot of concern for disabled populations or elderly in particular. And so that would be a strain on the healthcare system. And then you have this, brewing bird flu that is basically starting to morph and jump into the human population. Right now, it doesn't look like it's transmissible through air or anything like that. So it would be a slower transmission, but certainly something to be looking at in the next 3 years. So if the good news is we've been through one pandemic and it might have been a warm up. And so, we kind of have a template for what we can do, which is make sure that we have masks on hand, make sure that we still have good, sanitation with our hand washing and filters and all of those different things. And outdoor spaces. Like I know I'm planning on putting in a little cafe at the bookstore that I own. But I'm actually really grateful that most of it is outdoor seating because indoor seating restaurants, really took a hit during the first pandemic. So, just making some decisions about your life and lifestyle and what supplies you may have on hand or keep on hand in the eventuality that that becomes a thing. I don't think that from what I'm reading, it doesn't look like, it's going to be like an overnight thing with the bird flu, but it's going to be very hard to detect because, again, the data isn't being collected and shared by the government bodies that have typically done those things, as well as the fact that with JFK in the position, not JFK, RFK Jr. in the position he's at, he's pretty much an anti-vaxxer. And so in the past, we would have a response to develop vaccines and distribute them. And that kind of response may not be there when it comes to the next pandemic if all these people are in the same place they're in. So it's important that we just kind of realize, if those of you have been tuned out, just dip your toe in just a little bit. I really recommend getting on Substack and following just type in epidemiologist or cybersecurity and find some people that are experts in the field so they can give you the context. So what I love about it is it's not really sensational. It's just like, here are the facts. This is what we do in a scenario like this. And it's all about getting a little bit prepared so that if something like that does happen, you have your back. You have your own back, right? And your neighbors can have their own back. So I know like one of the things that's happening in my neighborhood, a lot of people are starting to grow their own food, um, and um, and just look at ways that they can take care of each other, having conversations about, oh, your backyard looks like it gets a lot of sun. Maybe that can be the focal for that. And we can all kind of go in and do take turns, tending to different plots or whatever. And so, yeah, so we're just kind of at this point in time where we have, you know, like just this perfect stew of environmental disasters. We have another pandemic kind of brewing over there. Um, and, um, and then we have, the whole modus operandus, and this isn't even a controversial thing to say, but like, you know, trying to basically dismantle the systems is what the Trump MAGA supporters, they were all about it. Maybe they didn't realize exactly what those systems did, but that is what this new administration is doing is it's going through and dismantling a lot of the systems without a new system really in place, right? And we're seeing those impacts with the firing of a lot of the FAA people, and then now there's a lot more close calls and incidents that are happening in our on our airwaves. So yeah, so those are the things to me. Like knowledge is power, and the most important thing we can be doing with those types of preparation in mind is also tending to our mental health and um, I have to say, even though I'm pretty aware of all these things, I've been able to really maintain. I'm not like panicked or freaking out. I'm just like, okay, well, this is a practical thing to do and I'm going to do it. It's just like preparing for hurricane coming. You just, go through this list, give yourself a little bit of peace of mind, and then, make sure that you are still, um, in this space of I don't know, for me, it's more about like radical joy. Even though I'm really busy because there, aside from all of that stuff that I've been talking about and preparing for and making sure that I have, the basics in, framework in place, I've also been making sure I spend time with my friends and my daughter and my awesome coworkers and just keeping my spirits high because one of the things that that bullies thrive on is fear. And so when you are prepared and you are tuned in and you are feeling like more powerful, then you're not as easily confused or swayed or thrown off balance, and you're able to respond and react when something comes at you, whether that be like a financial crisis brought on by a dismantling a government system or a hurricane or a pandemic or anything like that. And one of the other things that I really like to remind people about and have you consider is that we're actually better resourced and more prepared than at any other time in history. Even though it doesn't feel like it in many ways, because you're like, how is this happening? Like, why aren't they stopping this or that or the other thing? Um, if you look around at the incredible politicians that we have in place, the amount of people in America who care and are tapped in and are understanding things in a way that, 10, 20, 30, 40, certainly 50 years ago wasn't the case. We actually have a majority of people who actually care about each other and don't want anyone to see anyone suffer. And I think that that's a really important thing to be mindful of as we move forward, that there are definitely more people who care than there aren't, even though it doesn't feel like that sometimes. Mr. Rogers, who was certainly a resident of Winter Park at some point in time, he always said to look for the helpers. And right now is a really, really good time to think about, what does courage mean? How do we cultivate courage in ourselves and others? um, how can we be creative, and in that creativity be resilient and discover ways to be happy and joyous, with each other, and for each other, help each other, hold each other up, and give each other um, emotional or literal shelter, depending on, where our positionality is in the world. And also how to use our capital, for those who are wealthy, and are trying to figure out what to do, to support the moment right now. Just, singing lots of praises to you because that's amazing. Um, and continuing to support people that are giving voice, and helping the causes that you care about. So, yeah, I mean, I know that that was probably, um, a little bit of a bleak context, but it's practical, and it's powerful to be able to know which direction to go, and there are so many resources right now to just kinda help you. I mean, there was a little somebody put out a punch list of, "Okay, here's how you go to delete me, and this is exactly how you go to," which is to get your all of your information off the internet. Somebody else, how to freeze your credit, like those different kinds of things are, readily available. You've got people out there that are giving you the basically play by play. So all you have to do is take an afternoon one day, and make sure that you get some of that stuff done. Another thing I think I did was do a VPN, which I was like, what's a VPN? But it's a way to just kind of, again, protect from, hackers. Looking at this dramatic rise of AI, which certainly the hackers are going to be putting to use to do different things. And so that is just, some of the really important stuff that we can be doing right now to, prepare ourselves, create, um, just create a bigger safety stash for the hurricane season than you might typically would. And just be paying attention, really be paying attention to what epidemiologists, are saying, because you're not going to be able to, I mean, literally, even the weather, it's bizarre. It's beyond me why, the National Weather Association is, it's we're not gonna get into that. It's just a matter of recognizing that, accepting that those things are happening, and finding alternative resources, for information, because the information is still out there. It's just about knowing where to look. So, again, you're listening to Front Porch Radio. I'm Julie Wilder, and we have conversations for the common good. Today, I didn't have a guest, so I thought I would just kind of give you an update on the things that I have been doing, to protect, my household. Um, and, I mean, protect is a strong word, but just prepare it for possible shocks, economically, as well as with the food system, and environmental disasters moving forward. And those are some things that you can think about doing. Like, if you have the ability to look into solar panels, if you have the ability to, convert, your appliances to, propane so that they can be off grid. Those are some really practical, cool ways that you can also reduce the environmental impact, and do good things, at the same time, to get on to the other side of things. Other things like two-way radios that go over a distance in case, cellular towers go down. There's just some really practical things that are, kind of fun. I was even looking into getting like a ham radio signal. Um, there's, just as a fun project with my family. I think that some of these things are going to be coming back in the future. I've had this theory for a long time. One of my companies is called Yestermorrow, because I'm like, well, whatever. It's like the best of yesterday and the technologies of tomorrow being married together. And so, fun things like ham radio, and bartering and trading, where I think, we're going to see a lot more food swaps, and like equipment sharing, and things that, communities used to do just as a matter of like, this is what you do because you're all in it together. And, we've kind of gotten away from that because there's, too much of too many things, going around. And yeah, if we can just share more resources, make sure that you're, starting now to have dinner with your neighbors, invite them over. Um, We had a block party on my block, a couple of weeks ago, and it was just really great to be able to meet the people on my block, so that I had, faces to names to faces that I would see walking their dogs or whatever. Um, and it's just good practice anyway. And we just need to stick together, y'all. Stick together, try to keep our mental health up. And just, be smart. Be smart about how we walk through life. And yeah, everything's going to be all right as long as we stick together. And just to kind of bring it back to that Dr. Seuss analogy with the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, you know, fear is contagious, but so is courage, and so is helping other people. I saw a little video on, one of the social medias where this, carnival ride was kind of going crazy, and a bunch of people were just looking at it, and one dude just like went right up and he tried to like anchor it down. And when he did that, like 30 people joined him, right? And so it just takes, one person just stepping up and saying the courageous thing or doing the courageous thing, and setting a good example, and other people will join you. So yeah, now's the time to be courageous. Now's the time to be joyful. Now's the time to be kind and friendly, and just, look do a little bit of research right now, you know not in a like alarming, like panicky way. I'm not at all suggesting that. I'm suggesting the opposite. That I don't want you to be scared at all. Like, I want you to be prepared, and I want you to just, be able to take a look at what's happening if you have checked out. And I know a lot of people have, because it just seems all like noise at the end of the day. But there is some really, really great information out there and some incredible heroes. Again, on Substack, some of the people that I follow, Lexi's Substack, that is somebody who is like a cybersecurity expert. I also follow the Hartman Report. He's been an incredible resource for a really, really long time. Um, One of the people I also follow is Daniel Pinchback with Liminal News. That's kind of taking a look at more of the symbology of things that are going on, and looking at some of the more like spiritual components of this, or abuses of spiritual components of this. And then Heather Cox Richardson, she's everyone's best friend right now. She's a historian that's giving a very good synopsis day by day. So, if there's one thing you follow, Heather Cox Richardson, she's amazing. And it just gives you an idea of what's going on every day, so that you don't have to sift through a bunch of headlines and, flip through a bunch of different websites to try to figure it out. She's really, really great. So can't recommend Substack enough, and continue to support public radio today and in the future. Uh, Rollins College here, WPRK, is a incredible, incredible resource in our community. And I am just so grateful that we have this station here. It's really, really cool. Really, really cool. Another really cool publication is we have the community paper, which is distributed all throughout different neighborhoods in the downtown College Park, I think a couple other neighborhoods. And then, of course, there's the big rededication and push to support local, and shift your dollars away from what they used to call big box stores, but now it's like, big media. So anyway, thanks for listening. This has been Julie Wilder with Front Porch Radio. Have a great one.